Hello, welcome to Focus on Fantasy Romance, episode number 45, a podcast where we discuss books, genre, industry, and our geeky lives. I'm your host, Elle Klaus.
I'm A.R.D. Clark.
Sorry, I'm Paulina Woods.
Ishabelle is waving. And we have Electra on the line. So today we have a very special guest for you. We have Nicola Cameron. Say hi.
Hi.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Well, hi, I'm Nicola Cameron. I have been writing romance since 2012. Before that, I was writing science fiction and fantasy professionally since 1995. I have a bunch of books with Evernight Publishing. I also have a number of self-pub series, and I'm about to finish and will be releasing the third book in my fantasy romance series, Two Thrones, in mid-October.
So you started in traditional publishing as a sci-fi fantasy author?
Yes, I did.
Well, that's pretty awesome. What made you want to switch to romance?
Well, the thing is, I'd always liked writing about personal relationships and, sex. That's fine. And you can't always do that in science fiction because, well, it's just not really approved. So I saw a call for an Evernight anthology, and I thought, oh, you know what? I've always wanted to try writing romance. I'm going to do that, and especially since they like more spicier, more erotic romance. So I sent in a short story, and they bought it. And then I saw a call for their Romance on the Go line, so I wrote something for that, and they bought it. And that's how I got sucked in. So that's how Nicola was born.
So you mentioned earlier that you have a Two Thrones series. What inspired you to write this series?
Oh my God. Okay. Back in early 2015, I'm not going to name names, but there was a romance writer who kind of had a bit of an online tantrum. And let's simply say that she let out a dare. She sent out a dare saying, I dare you to write an 80,000 word romance novel, have it professionally edited, have a professional cover on, and put it online for sale in 6 months. I dare you. I said, I'll do it in 6 weeks. Watch this. And that turned out to be Empress of Storms. Now, luckily, I actually had a snippet of a fantasy that was not a fantasy romance, a fantasy novel that I wound up grabbing. And in 4 weeks, I turned that into an 80,000 word novel and had it edited. And I had the wonderful J.A. here do my cover. And it wound up going on sale in mid-October. And to date, that is still my best-selling title. And it's a fantasy romance about kind of a May-December wedding between two royals. I've got a Queen Danae, who rules the country of Hellas. She was supposed to marry the son of King Matthias of Ypres. Unfortunately, the son has gone missing. And treaty dictates that she has to marry some royal from Ypres now. The only one who's available is Matthias. Well, it turns out she's had a crush on him since she was a kid. It's just that he's always thought of her as, his daughter-in-law to be, and he's still mourning his wife. So the story kind of follows how these two have to wind up coming to terms with each other and making their marriage work, and then fighting off outside forces that basically want to kill them and take over their countries.
As you do in fantasy settings.
Yeah.
So you said May-December romance for book one. Is there any type of tropes that you tend to write more often than not? Like you unconsciously gravitate to this type of trope?
I definitely like May-December romances because I like older men, which is getting problematic now that I'm 51. But let's see that. I like friends to lovers tropes. Those are always kind of fun. And I also tend to do a lot of, and I don't know why, stuff set near water. I've got an entire series that's set on the Atlantic coast of Florida. In Two Thrones, Danae rules an island country. So water plays a really big part in a lot of my romances. And I don't think that's a trope, but it's there.
Well, it seems to be working if
Yeah.
book one is your bestseller. So now I'm going to pass it to Amy, who's going to ask some more questions.
Yeah, you'll have to excuse me because I haven't been feeling very well for the past couple of days, so I'm kind of not 100% myself. But so we have conversations in the background on our own personal chat off of the podcast, and one of the things that we talk about is crossing the genre lines and writing in multiple genres. And I noticed that you do that. You have some shifter romances, you have your fantasy romance and your science fiction romance that, you know, because I kind of stalked your webpage a little bit. But do you find it's a challenge for your readers to cross over those lines with you?
I think that sometimes, yes, it can be. I try to give people a heads up so that they know this is not, this is not going to be a fantasy romance, or this is not going to be a science fiction romance. My problem is that I guess I could separate them all out into different names if I absolutely had to. I like writing. I like coloring outside the lines. It's very hard for me to stick to just one genre. So I enjoy writing, science fiction. I enjoy writing fantasy. I enjoy writing paranormal romance. I enjoy writing romance. Now that I did separate. My romance goes out as Nicola Cameron, and my MF romance tends to go out as Nicola M. Cameron. It's just a way of readers to be able to know what the main coupling is going to be. I guess I may have kind of shot myself in the foot a little bit by, switching between genres so much. But the thing is, I've got to write what's in my heart, and I've got to write what interests me. And I like a lot of different stuff. I like different genres. I don't want to be stuck in just writing one. And now, granted, I'm doing this for money because I do have these little things called bills, and I like to eat. But I don't want this to be turning into something that I dread doing. I don't want to dread sitting down at the keyboard and I got to write another fantasy story when I've got this incredible science fiction romance in the back of my head. So I think by now my readers are kind of used to the fact that I will be jumping genres, and if they like it, that's great. They'll read it, and if they don't, they'll wait until I come out with something that they will read.
Okay, so you might be my sister from another mister. But anyway, we won't even go there because that's a long-standing argument between all of us. But tell me about when you were a new author, whether in your traditionally published sense of being a new author, like a brand newbie, or when you were a new self-published author. Did you encounter any hurdles that you would be able to give new authors in your position some advice on how to get over those? Like what was the main hurdle that you encountered as a new author?
The main hurdle I actually encountered as a new author was writing long, because before that I had been primarily a short story writer. And you can do that in romance, but I wanted to do a novel. I had this idea for a novel, and that was a challenge because it brings a whole different outlook to what you're writing. You need to fall back on a different toolbox. I described it as a short story is like cutting a diamond. It's got to be precise. It's got to be brilliant. You've got to know what you're doing. When you are writing a novel, it's more like creating a tiara. There's a whole bunch of gems, and they're all kind of interconnected, and you got to figure out how to get from point A to point B, and how to make the whole thing, shine as bright as a diamond. So that was a challenge for me. Basically getting into that mindset and teaching myself how to write long, accepting the fact that it is going to be a marathon, and it is. Very few. I've learned how to write faster, which is good, but very few people can just crank out a good novel in, a couple of months or a couple of weeks. So that was an eye opener, and that's something I like to tell new writers. Don't worry if it takes time. It's going to, because you want to do the best you can. And if you're just cranking stuff out, sometimes it's great. There are writers, and I hate them, who can compose at the keyboard, and what they put out is absolutely amazing. They are few and far between. Most of us, it is a slog. There are going to be times when you're looking at your stuff and thinking, what made me think I was literate in the first place? Oh my God, they're going to find out that I'm a hack, and they're going to laugh me out of this job. And that's normal. And every writer goes through that. Neil Gaiman goes through that. Lauren Donner goes through that. It's okay. Well, I'm not sure about Lauren. She's kind of a unique case to herself, who is awesome, by the way. But I mean, most writers go through that, and it's okay. And you just pull through. And you get to the end. If necessary, you promise yourself that you will clean up any crap that you've spewed onto the page in the edit. The most important thing is to wind up with a complete manuscript. Then you can start wielding the editorial machete and sending it off to your editor and getting everything cleaned up. But it's the nailing your butt to a chair and getting to that point where you can literally type the end and feel like you've achieved something. That's tough.
And so my last question is that as writers on this podcast, which we all dabble here and there, we talk about craft, and we talk about how constantly honing the craft, understanding the craft of writing. You have to understand the rules before you can break them, which is one of my favorite things to do. And so we're always learning, and we're constantly looking at, writing books and workshops and whatnot. Is there one specific thing in the past that you've done as far as honing your craft that you would recommend for other people?
I would say be careful about what workshops you take and what books you read, because you can wind up kind of getting sucked into a time sink where you're spending so much time going to workshops and reading books and kind of reading about the craft that you're not actually practicing it. So find a couple of really, really good, highly recommended people, learn from them, and then sit your butt down and apply what you've learned. So yeah, that's pretty much what I would recommend.
Okay, so Paulina has her questions up next because she's on a time crunch for work, so we'll switch over to her.
Yes, I get to go serve alcohol to people who are going to be screaming at a screen and on a fight. Whatever.
Lucky you.
Well, if I make money, lucky me. So if I don't, I just had 6 days for nothing. But before the podcast started, we were talking. I was like, shh, don't talk about it. So about the names of your, like, I just made up random names in my head to kind of pronounce them. Where do you come up with your names?
Depends on the story. For Two Thrones, and I freely admit this, and this has confused people. Because I was on a time crunch, I had 6 weeks to get this from beginning to, hello, it's on Amazon. I literally draped Fantasy Drag over Greece and Belgium. Okay, I opened up the maps in Google and I was just grabbing names. So if there's reasons why, certain town names and things like that in Ypres and Hellas sound familiar, that's why. Because it's basically, I just grabbed Greek and Belgian place names. Now that works for there. I'm starting to move away a little bit from that as I continue the series, because I have gotten people going, I don't know if this is real or not because you're using this place name I know. And I'm like, oh, crap. Okay, yeah, I probably should kind of change that up a little bit. So I'll play with the spelling or the pronunciation. Or sometimes I'll just name a place after someone, a friend of mine, or a place that I particularly like.
Yeah, that's my problem.
I lace in jokes into my books all the time. I put a Doctor Who in joke into a fantasy story. I just put, God, what did I put in? I put in another, media tie-in joke into Lady of Thorns. So yeah, it's what I do. I like amusing people who will be reading along and then they'll go, oh, wait a minute, I get that. I see what you did. So.
Okay. Well, I also seen that you write kind of like me. You don't write just all straight or all gay or all whatever. So what do you find most exciting to write? Like, what do you lean more towards?
Because I started off as a regular science fiction writer, science fiction romance was, and always will be my very favorite thing to write. But I never thought I would write fantasy romance. That was the thing. And then I did Empress of Storms, and I realized how much fun it was. I think my problem is when I was younger, I was kind of turned off by Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings. And it's like, oh, all they're doing is marching across a landscape and eating stew. This is boring. And because writing the in writing the Two Thrones series, I've come to realize that, well, I can play around with that. It doesn't have to be just an adventure series. There can be politics. There can be, there can be comedy. There can be incredible, deep romance. There can be all kinds of wonderful elements that I'm using to shape this world. So science fiction romance is still my all-time favorite, but I have to admit, and this is surprising me, fantasy romance is kind of coming up behind it as my second favorite thing to write.
But how about couples?
Couples.
Do you like like me personally? I like writing them all, but my favorite is male, female, male. So I mean, every author has their favorite they go to.
The thing is, it really depends on the story. It's going to depend on who pops into my head with what story, and then I go from there. So, I mean, Two Thrones, that's MF. I have a science fiction romance called Two to Tango that was inspired by John Barrowman and Misha Collins tangoing at a con. And they posted a picture of this, and I thought, oh, that's cute. They're goofing around. Wait a minute. And 20 minutes later, I had the book idea. So it's really depends on the story as it comes to me, the characters as they come to me, and then I go from there. I like them both. I like writing MM. I like writing MF. I will also do MMM or MMF. It's
whatever the character.
Like I said, it just comes down to what the story requires.
Okay, and you did say, and I know you mentioned earlier about writing in 6 weeks. I'm trying to write in 2 weeks, and I'm like bulking at 20 words. How did you actually accomplish that? Are you did you sleep?
No, I didn't. Okay, just last week, Evernight had an antho call for their lawless anthos. It was supposed to be about, big burly bad men who are on the wrong side of the law, but they're loyal to their women. And the deadline was the 8th. And I think the the word limit had to be like somewhere between 10 to 15,000 words. Wednesday rolls around, the 6th, and suddenly my drunken bitch of a muse swans into town, breathing stolely on my ear, and says, I got an idea for you. So I literally wrote 13,500 words in less than 48 hours. No, I did not sleep. Okay. My husband would kind of tiptoe it. You okay? Shall I change the caffeine IV? Okay. Here, have some M&Ms. That's fine. Okay, baby. I'll talk to you later. Bye. So, I've learned how to turn off my internal editor, and I can usually get about 3,000 words a day if I know what I'm doing and I know where I'm going. It doesn't always work because sometimes real life gets in the way, or sometimes I get blocked basically. And I've come to realize that if I get blocked, it means I'm going down a wrong path. I've got to back up and kind of figure out what went wrong with the story and where I'm going wrong. If I can figure that out, I get to plow ahead again.
Cool. Ish or Electra, who wants to ask their question? Oh, I seen Ish move her hand. Ish, your turn.
I think she was scratching her nose.
I know.
All right. So you mentioned that you genre hop. When you do genre hop from, between your sci-fi and fantasy and your shifters, do you keep in mind writing to market regardless of the genre hop?
Actually, yes, I do. And because you want to be able to sell. I mean, this is my job. It's a job I love. It's a job that I'm very happy to have and I'm very grateful to have. But ultimately, I'm here to write stories that are going to sell. So I do try to keep an idea of what's going on in the market, what's hot, what's upcoming. And if I can write to that, yes, I will. And I don't have a problem with that. I'm not I don't have the luxury of just writing whatever I want. It would be great if I could, but I do have a luxury of being able to write between genres that I like. And as long as I try to keep them, what do I write within that genre and appealing to the market, I don't have a problem with that. I'm still doing what I love. I still have one of the best jobs in the world. I'm just writing good, ripping, romance yarns that people will enjoy. So,
do you have any more questions, Ish? Electra?
Actually, I do. So you said that you like to write about sex. Do you tend, in your sex scenes, do you tend to lean towards more erotic and physical, or more towards emotion and sex?
they tend to get a little bit explicit, yeah. The emotion part is important because this is romance. And I mean, you can get as sexy as you want, but they have to be in love. They have to fall in love during the story, and you need to have a happy ever after. So emotions do play a part without a doubt. But I do enjoy writing the really, really dirty stuff too. So I try to interweave that as much as possible. And one of my friends who beta reads for me says, "You write some of the best damn sex scenes I have ever written, I've ever read," and she's had quite the life. So I take that as a high compliment. That whatever I write seems to really kind of work for her. So I tend towards more erotic. I tend towards more explicit. Um, Sometimes I can get a little sweet. It depends on the story. I just happen to enjoy reading really sensual, really sexual, erotic love scenes. So it's because it's what I enjoy reading. It's what I tend to write. Of course, that's a problem. That's a problem when someone inspires one of your books and you let him know about this, and then he says, "Oh, I'd like to see a copy," and then you send it to him, and you realize, "Oh crap, there are some sex scenes in there," and he's about to read them, and he knows that he inspired the story, and oh shit, I'm never going to be able to look at this man in the face as long as I live. So that can be a problem. That's something you kind of have to keep in mind if you're doing this. But apart from that, I enjoy writing the hot love scenes. Yes.
Awesome. And then I was noticing on the back of your wall, you have a very interesting picture that keeps drawing my attention. It's the picture with the cigar.
That is my nephew. His wife is a photographer, and she did a series of voodoo gods and goddesses. I forgot the formal name for them. And my nephew Mike posed as Papa Legba. So that's what you're seeing on the back of my wall.
All right. I was like, that keeps drawing my attention.
Yeah, basically, if I don't know what else you can see. You probably can see most of my design table behind me because I make jewelry as well. Oh. And in fact, I just finished making a whole bunch of stuff before I started the podcast. So there's crap everywhere.
No, it was looked really fun, and I didn't know if that was part of an inspiration of one of your novels or anything like that, and that's why that's up there. Or...
No, I just that Meredith had posted it, and I saw it and said, "I want that in a print." And she's like, "Not a problem, Auntie Mel." So she sent it to me. By the way, real name's Melanie, just so you know. I have no problem with people knowing what my legal name is.
Okay, I think we had some follow-up questions. Do you have any more questions, Electra?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay, I think Paulina chimed in first.
Yeah, I was gonna let Ish go before she goes back out again. But anyway, no, it's kind of like I was laughing when you were talking about inspired. You know how someone inspired a character, and then the scene, and you're like, "Oh my god, they're gonna read it."
Yeah.
My vampire is actually named after my guy crush at work because I have a boyfriend, but he's hot too. And he read the book and he was like, so Esteban, I'm like, oh my God. I didn't forget, but I didn't know he was going to read it. And I was just like, I just used your name. He's like, he has dark hair, my eye color. I'm like, oh crap. So like, I totally get it. Like, it's really embarrassing now every time he sees me at work because he's a manager. He's like, Esteban. I'm like, shut up.
just stop it, drop it. Funnily enough, after I'd had that realization, and after I'd had the freak out after the realization, I actually came up with a really good idea for a contemporary romance where basically a romance writer kind of breaks up with her boyfriend, drunkenly contacts her celebrity crush and says, by the way, you inspired my book. This is really cool. And he says, oh, really? Can I have a copy? And she sends it to him, and then wakes up in the next morning realizing what she's done, because she and her best friend hopped in an Uber and actually went to a all-night mail place and sent him a physical copy of the book. So she's like, he can't read this. He can't read this. Oh my God. So she and her best friend wind up going to the set, trying to break into his hotel room to steal the book back, and then hijinks ensue. So that's like a cool story that I'm going to have to write probably sometime in January, because I am booked up for the rest of the year.
All right, Amy, you want to go?
Yeah, I was going to say on that topic. So like one of my greatest dreams ever is that Ed Sheeran inspired a couple of my fantasy novels and my fantasy romance with his songs. Mm-hmm. And actually I think in the dedication it says that, but I'm not sure. But anyway, I'm like, if anybody ever goes to an Ed Sheeran concert and tosses one of my books up on stage, so that's like my greatest dream ever. I've tweeted before, writing to Ed Sheeran, at Ed Sheeran or whatever. Because I'm like, if Ed Sheeran was ever like, oh, Amy, I love your books, I'd probably die of happiness.
Yeah, that's pretty much what happens. You just kind of go, he knows who I am, and so.
Yep. My husband says, if Ed Sheeran came into work and I got his autograph, what would you do? I said, I would beat you black and blue for not calling me to come down there and meet him in person. Don't just give me his autograph. I need to see.
I want to meet him. Okay, come on, work with me here.
Right, exactly.
Oh man, yeah, it's kind of an interesting feeling when you wind up talking to someone who has actually inspired one of your books.
Authors are fangirls too.
Yes, totally. They are. Yes, they are.
Yes, we are. But it's usually worse than a lot of other people.
Well, the nice thing is when you get whoever your celebrity crush is turns out to be really sweet and really kind, and you're just thinking, I love you, but not in a creepy way. Just so you know that it's like you're in the will, man. Okay, thank you for being so tolerant and patient of my weirdness, and I just appreciate that. So just so you know. So it's kind of nice when you get feedback like that.
Mm-hmm.
So Ish just having some technical problems with background noise, and she wanted to know how you see the word smut versus erotic.
Smut versus, well, I've got a running joke that I write all the smut that's fit to print. So I think that comes down to personal taste. It's like one person's pornography is another person's erotica, is a third person's smut. It all depends on your personal preferences and your personal boundaries, what's going to offend you, what isn't going to offend you. There's stuff that I would happily read and I would happily write that my sister would just recoil from. And you probably vice versa. So it's a definition, and it's a definition that is not objective. It is so subjective that it's not funny. So it really comes down to personal tastes and what you prefer to read, what you prefer to write. You just, as a writer, you just have to realize that not everyone is going to appreciate what you write. That's cool. That's personal taste. You have to allow for that, and just kind of accept it and go on from there.
So do your sex scenes push the plot forward, or
yes, as far as I'm concerned, if there's not a reason, it's not like I'm going to be writing la 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 la, okay, it's time for a sex scene. That's not romance. That's more erotica, which is fine. I love erotica. Erotica's totally cool. But with a romance, you kind of have to have a reason for the people to be having sex. And ideally, it's a way to have the reader learn more about them. What's driving them? What's driving their needs? Why are they attracted to each other? Are there going to be problems later on that's going to pull them apart? And showing a sex scene is a really good way of exploring these characters more, because sex is such an integral and basic part of human nature that being able to see these two characters, interacting in such an intimate way gives you a really good viewpoint into who they are and what they're going to do with the story.
So Paulina and I were chatting a little bit earlier, and she was making an observation that in books, the sex scenes or lovemaking or whatever key level you're working on is always perfect. You're not falling off beds or turning on the television with a hand and a remote, breaking stuff. So are your sex scenes perfect? Or do you have your characters fumbling and kind of being awkward and a little more realistic than the fantasy sex scenes?
I had heard complaints about that, and there's nothing wrong with a perfect sex scene, because what we write, this applies to contemporary science fiction, whatever. It's a fantasy. It's something with male stories, you never hear about cleaning out, or the after effects or things like that. So you just kind of want to focus on what's going to play into that fantasy. That being said, I do like to have little realistic touches. I have a fail sex scene in Storm Season, which is my very first novel. In Degree of Resistance, there's kind of a scene where the female lead realizes that the male lead has actually been brainwashed, thinks he's this other character, and he wants to have sex with her. And she's like, I can't do this. You cannot give consent. They've never done it before. So it's like, we are not going to be doing this. But she loves him, and she thought he was dead for like 12 years. And so it's kind of like, how do we work this out where I can keep, your programming happy without crossing my boundaries, because I am not going to make you do something that I don't know you want to do. So, yeah, I mean, I like playing around with that sometimes in a scene, because that, once again, it goes back to sex being a good way of investigating who a character really is. And screwing up, falling off the bed, laughing a little, catching a finger on something, it makes the character more realistic, and it gives the reader more of a hook into them and makes them fonder of them and more interested in what happens to them during the story.
I really like that little touch of the consent, because consent is a big issue when you're dealing with high heat romance, and anything that the characters don't actually have consent, I don't consider romance. So I really like that touch. And so we do have an opportunity for any listeners, if they want to read any of your stories, you have a giveaway, correct?
Yes, I do. I am giving away 2 books. I'm giving away the first book in my Pacific Rising series. That is my science fiction romance. And in fact, that's the one that we were just discussing with the consent issue, Degree of Resistance. I am also giving away a copy of the second book in my Two Thrones series, Palace of Scoundrels. And the third book in that series will be out in mid-October. I am finishing it up at the moment.
Okay. So in order to, I assume these are ebook copies.
Yes. I will give ebooks out in whatever format they prefer.
Okay. So in order to be entered to win, for a chance to win one of these ebook copies, you need to make a comment on our blog, which is focusonfantasyromance.wordpress.com. Make a comment, ask Nicola a question, and that will enter you to win. We'll leave it open for 30 days. So October 15. Oh my gosh, it's that late in the year. And then we'll work it out. So leave a comment. So where can people find you online?
I'm available on Twitter at Yes, It's Nicola C. I'm available on Facebook at Nicola Cameron Writes. My website and blog are at www.nicolacameronwrites.com or just nicolacameron.com. That will redirect. And I'm also on Google Plus. I'm all over the place. So just check things out. And I have links to my Twitter and Facebook pages on my website as well. And I try to post blog updates pretty much every day. That'll be a mix of just stuff that I want to talk about, and I also do guest blog posts promoting my friends' books. So you'll get a nice mix of stuff that's going on in the romance world and things that you can read.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us. If you liked the podcast, please like, comment, and share. This has been episode number 45 of Focus on Fantasy Romance. Good night.